Let's talk about the best books of 2017 that almost won a prize. You and your book club have probably heard already about some of the biggest books of 2017, the ones that won the big literary prizes. They get pretty heavily marketed to us, so we're usually familiar with what they are, and we know to consider them at least as possible reads for our book clubs. These would include George Saunders' book Lincoln and the Bardo, which won the Man Booker Prize, Colson Whitehead's book The Underground Railroad, which won the Pulitzer, Jesmyn Ward's novel Sing, Unburied, Sing, which won the National Book Award for Fiction, and anything by Kazuo Ishiguro, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature for his whole body of work. But what about the runners-up for these prizes? What about the books that almost made it? We hardly hear anything about them, but they're obviously also really great choices for book clubs to read. So today, I'm going to tell you what they are. Winning one of these literary prizes is like winning Olympic gold. It gives the author a huge surge in sales and new readership. In fact, the Man Booker Prize reported in 2016 that the prize winner that year, which was Marlon James's book A Brief History of Seven Killings, received a 933% increase in sales. That's almost unimaginable. The fact is, though, that the runners-up for that prize got nothing like that kind of publicity and exposure. And yet, if you think about what happens in the Oscars, where a lot of moviegoers dispute whether the right movie won the Oscar, the same thing happens with these literary prizes. Everybody's got a different opinion of which of the books that were finalists were really the best. I'll give you a great example of this. I looked through the lists of Pulitzer Prize winners going back a couple of decades. In 1991, John Updike won the Pulitzer Prize for the last book in his Rabbit series, which no doubt was an important book. It was part of an important series that chronicled our culture at the time. But one of the finalists that year was Tim O'Brien's book, The Things They Carried. And I think it's indisputable that O'Brien's book has had more lasting power. It's on the curriculum of almost every high school, and a lot of students not only have read that book, but really enjoyed it, appreciated it, took a lot from it, and it continues to be talked about and read today. That book didn't get the kind of buzz that Updike's book got at the time because it wasn't the Pulitzer winner. So here's a list of the finalists for each of those prizes for 2017 that might make great reads for your book club in 2018. For the National Book Award, Elliot Ackerman's Dark at the Crossing, Lisa Ko's The Leavers, Min Jin Lee's Pachinko, Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, The King is Always Above the People by Daniel Alarcón, Miss Burma by Charmaine Craig, Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan, A Kind of Freedom by Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, and Carol Zoreff's Barren Island. Then there's the Man Booker Prize, 4321 by Paul Auster, History of Wolves by Emily Friedland, Elmet by Fiona Mosley, Lincoln and the Bardo by George Saunders, and Autumn by Ali Smith. And for the Pulitzer Prize, Imagine Me Gone by Adam Hazlitt, and The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan. The Nobel Committee does not release the names of its finalists until 50 years later, so we have a little wait for that one. But in the meantime, I'll post Kazuo Ishiguro's Nobel speech in the links below. You might have noticed that the only repeated title out of that whole list that was a finalist for 2 prizes was George Saunders' book. Maybe that's a sign that we ought to read Saunders in particular, but I think it also tells us that there's a lot of great literature out there, and we need to keep our eyes open to possibilities beyond the books that win the big prizes and get the big publicity. I hope off of that list you'll be able to find something interesting for your book club to read together this year. Read on!